George Galloway, and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
What, still no ceasefire? The massacres continue. World War II style footage emerges now that Israel has withdrawn from Gaza City, of field executions of dozens, scores, maybe hundreds of young boys killed in cold blood, shot in the back of the head. And a full-scale massacre is currently taking place in the southern city of KhanYunis, to which Palestinians were told 3 months ago to flee because all of their foes were in the north of Gaza. That whack-a-mole continues right now in the gates of Rafah, where the town, bloated by tens of thousands of people living under plastic sheeting and rudimentary tents, are waiting for the juggernaut to roll in. Egypt, meanwhile, has erected tall fences, barbed wire, and even a wall between themselves and the suffering Palestinian people. And though Israel has been digging shallow graves for Palestinians, it's dug a very big, deep grave for the presidency of Joseph Biden, whose ratings fell again today and who's now a whopping 5% nationwide down on Donald Trump. If you look at the swing states, the margin is much larger than that. Oh, and the entire future of British politics now turns on the by-election in the city of Rochdale in the northwest of England. You may not know Rochdale. Many of you're going to know it by the end of the month. Fasten your seatbelts. It's the mother of all talk shows.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway, the mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway, the world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
The massacres in the Gaza Strip, 25 miles long and at its narrowest 5 miles wide, will never be forgotten. As I said, the Palestinians are in shallow graves, but Zionism and the State of Israel has dug a deep grave for its own reputation and an even deeper one for the presidency of Joe Biden. No matter when the firing ceases, and there's absolutely no sign of that, those that refused to call for one, those that refused to force one when they had it in their power to do so, will never be forgotten. They are just as culpable as the people pulling the triggers, as the people pressing the buttons that rain down death and destruction on people in a cage. This wasn't shooting fish in a barrel. This was incinerating, eviscerating human beings in a cage with nowhere to run, with nowhere to hide. And those that shipped the weapons there in double quick time, the United Kingdom amongst them, from their base in Cyprus. Those that conducted the intelligence overflights, the United Kingdom amongst them, which has flown dozens of such intelligence flights over Gaza, the better to target the Israeli bombs and rockets, are just as guilty as the pilots that sent the bombs and the rockets raining down overwhelmingly on women and children. More than 70% of the more than 100,000 casualties in this 3 months of hell, this quarter from hell, were women and children, and more than half of the dead in these 3 months have been children. I think it's safe to say that never, certainly in modern times, by which I mean since the Dark Ages, has any war anywhere taken a toll of so many children. More children are being murdered every day in the Gaza Strip, even than were murdered at Treblinka, at Auschwitz, at Belsen, and the other horror death camps of the Nazi Holocaust, which took the lives of tens of millions of people, 6 million of them Jewish people, whose extermination was the goal of the Nazi brutes and their facilitators and their allies. That Holocaust was brought to an end by the Red Army of the then Soviet Union, the successor state of which is Russia. And that's why Russia was not invited to the anniversaries of the liberations of those camps. The Germans, whose camps they were invited as honored guests. The Ukrainians, who guarded those camps for the Nazi beasts, were honored guests also. The Poles, who actually built the camps for the Nazis, were honored guests and hosts of these liberation ceremonies. The people who ended it all were not welcome on that voyage. Just think about that. We'll talk later to Afshin Rattansi about the state of affairs in Ukraine, in Russia, in the great proxy war still raging there between NATO and the Russian Federation. But back to Gaza, back to Palestine for a moment. There is all kind of talk of ceasefire. People who told us that a ceasefire would be entirely wrong 10, 20, 30,000 casualties ago are now saying they want a ceasefire. They'll have to explain, if and when there ever is a ceasefire, why exactly at what point they decided a ceasefire was no longer a capitulation to Hamas and now was the right thing to call for. But it will not, of course, end this suppurating sore. That's why I find some reluctance inside me, in my own conscience, to be enthusiastic about the slogan, ceasefire now. Of course, I want a ceasefire now, because all these children and their mothers and their fathers, their grandmothers, their grandfathers, their brothers, their sisters, their sons and their daughters, I feel are a part of me as a human being who has spent many, many, many days in the very Gaza Strip, now eviscerated, now obliterated. But a ceasefire is not enough. There has to be an end to the war. There has to be an end to the occupation. There has to be a settlement for the national rights of the Palestinian people, or all of this will go on happening again. I've been reviewing, for electoral purposes, some of the speeches I gave in 2006 in the Israeli invasion of Lebanon, in 2008 in Cast-led the first wholesale genocidal effort by Israel in Gaza. Speeches in 2012, 2014, 2018, over and over and over again, these genocidal, frenzied, unhinged attempts to exterminate the Palestinian people, or at least their presence in Palestine, anywhere, are as regular as clockwork. And I know because I used to be the one to whom it fell to lead the relief efforts, organizing convoys of aid going through hostile countries, fighting our way into the Gaza Strip, fighting against Arab dictatorship, most of the time in the case of Hosni Mubarak's Egypt, but not he alone. The truth is, a ceasefire which breaks down in a week, a ceasefire which leads to nothing, a ceasefire which continues the state of siege with the electricity, the water, the means of life entirely controlled by the Israeli occupation army, is no solution to this problem at all. And I guarantee, moreover, that there will be more resistance. I was asked by a journalist today if I condemned the Palestinian resistance. I said if I were alive and you were asking me this question in the 1940s, if I condemned the resistance of the Maquis, the French resistance against the illegal, violent, foreign military occupation of their country, you wouldn't dare ask me that question. You want me to condemn the partisans in Yugoslavia, in Italy? You want me to condemn the resistance fighters in Greece? What would we do if there was a foreign, military, violent, illegal occupation of our own country? We would fight it. Well, some would be out selling financial services to the occupier, no doubt. But any decent British person would be doing whatever they could, even if it was just to curse this in their heart or to condemn it with their lips. But those who could would be raising their hand, their fist, their weapon, whatever weapon they could get, to expel the foreign invader from their land. That's all that the Palestinian people are doing. And moreover, they are acting entirely lawfully in doing so. International law guarantees to them the right to resist foreign occupation of their land, their homes, and in defense of their families. It doesn't grant the illegal occupier any rights at all. In fact, it places obligations on the foreign occupier, obligations which have been entirely, in toto, from A to Z, breached and made mockery of by the state of Israel, which continues to sit in the United Nations, which continues to have the warmest, most convivial relationship with virtually every single government in the West, continues to participate in cultural events, if I can put it that way, like the Eurovision Song Contest, sporting events like UEFA and FIFA, European Championships, World Championships of every kind. Incidentally, while Russia is banned completely from all of them. So the big grave, deep grave of their own reputation, such as it was, amongst thinking people there was no reputation to lose. But a large swathe of people who had deliberately averted their eyes from the horrors of apartheid Israel have now been forced to concentrate upon them. And it will never be glad, confident morning again. Not for Israel, and neither for their enablers and facilitators, the famous friends of Israel, which infest every political party in every Western country. It will never be glad, confident morning for them either. People will dog their steps. Their role in this horror will follow them to their graves and follow them into their obituaries and follow them into their political memories and their history. And that's nowhere more true than in the United States of America. The state of Michigan is a no-go area for the Democratic Party, for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. No one in Michigan wants to look at the face of the people who made this mass murder possible, who doubled down on it, who protected it in the United Nations, who proselytized for it daily at press conferences, in the press pit in the White House in Washington. No one wants to look at the face of the person who handed the weapon to the school shooter, who massacred innocents hiding under their desk. What kind of people would they be if they did? The state of Michigan is central, critical to any possibility, however remote, of Joe Biden retaining the presidency of the United States. Biden's ratings have fallen again to the lowest rating of a sitting president awaiting or hoping for re-election in just a few months' time in the history of polling in the United States of America. Joe Biden's ratings are so on the floor that even Donald Trump looks good by comparison. Certainly the American people seem to think so. A national lead of 5% in the presidential opinion poll translates into a landslide popular vote and electoral college vote in November for Donald Trump. If I were Donald Trump, I'd be hiring me some Russian bodyguards, because the only way they're going to stop Donald Trump now is with extreme prejudice, and I'm not making that up. And so, Joe Biden will have sacrificed the Democratic Party for Benjamin Netanyahu, a man who treats him, incidentally, with unalloyed contempt, a man who laughs in his face when he sends Blinken blinking to Tel Aviv over and over again to ask if they can kill these children a little more quietly, a little more gently. On and on goes the war, says Netanyahu, even this evening, amid talk of a temporary ceasefire. The British political class is bought and sold in toto. I mean in toto. Even the Green Party, even the Liberal Party, never mind the Conservatives and the Labour parties. They are all wholly owned subsidiaries, and I mean owned subsidiaries of the Israel lobby here in Britain. That much is obvious. How else can you explain, other than the existence of compromat, and how could I possibly know about that, other than the existence of videotapes of Peter Mandelson in bed with Wes Streeting, with Tony Blair taking the snaps, could possibly explain the unremitting, unrelenting, unashamed support by the opposition Labour Party, whose job is to oppose government policy, to expose it to scrutiny, to forensically examine it, have written a blank check to Rishi Sunak, which he's cashed in his blind support for every Israeli crime. KeirStarmer, a King's Counsel, formerly known as a QC, Queen's Counsel, a human rights lawyer, started this 3-month quarter from hell by stating on television, on LBC, on video, you can see his lips moving, you can hear them coming, the words coming from his tongue, that Israel had the right to cut off water and electricity from 2.3 million people, even though as a Queen's Counsel, King's Counsel, he has to have known that such a thing would be a blatantly, brazenly illegal act under every law, British, European, international, Geneva Conventions, crimes of war, humanitarian law. Every law forbids that which Starmer stated on television Israel had the right to do. He kicked 7 of his front benchers off the front bench, sacked them for daring to vote months into the conflict when tens of thousands had already fallen for maybe a little pause, maybe a little ceasefire. He still has not said a single word about the finding of the ICJ in The Hague that plausibly Israel was committing acts of genocide. The deputy leader of the Labour Party. Angela Rayner, but I call her Ratner. She sure has trashed her own brand. Angela Ratner says on television that she does not know if Israel has committed acts of genocide. Well, if she does not know, she's too stupid to be the Deputy Prime Minister of Britain. And if she does know and is pretending not to know, she's too wicked to be the Deputy Prime Minister of Britain. Lastly, according to the Mail on Sunday, Britain's biggest selling newspaper, the whole of British politics now turns on me. A good friend of mine, a professorial friend of mine, John Bevan, said in 2003 that for a brief moment, Britain was polarised between Tony Blair and me. And now, according to the Mail on Sunday, I'm right back there again. Rishi Sunak is waiting to see if I can defeat KeirStarmer in the Rochdale by-election on the 29th of this month, and it may prompt a snap British general election. I didn't want my friends to show that, but mainly because of the grotesquely insulting caricature within. Now, I don't believe that Rishi Sunak will call a general election. Turkeys don't vote for an early Christmas. But I do say this: if I defeat Keir Starmer's Labour in Rochdale, it will plunge the Labour Party into the deepest possible crisis, as scores of Labour MPs, who might themselves then face defeat in whenever the general election comes, will be battering down Starmer's door and demanding a change of direction on the issue of Israel-Palestine. That much I'm certain of. Fasten your seatbelts. We've got some great guests, starting with the one and only Lowkey right after this.
There's a group of people in Twitter who are daily posting discussions about Gaza, Lebanon, what's happening, news updates, aid for Gaza, and trying to enlist the help of Jordan and France and any other regional entity that will help get more aid into Gaza and all of Gaza, all of Palestine, for everyone who suffers. So I want to request that everyone who is listening to this go to your local council meetings and peacefully request that their representatives at the local levels do this, because it works.
Thanks for the call, Pia, in Uruguay. I'm a free man of the city of San Francisco, awarded to me for my work on Palestine, on the steps of City Hall itself. So it was a particular delight for me that the San Francisco Council voted by 8 votes to 3 to demand a ceasefire. And that decision didn't come out of nowhere. It came out of campaigning to force the local authority representatives to vote.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
We've got a poll running. By defunding UNRWA, are the US, EU and UK complicit in war crimes? Duh. Well, overwhelmingly people say yes, and the overwhelming number is 23,045 votes so far, and the show has only just begun. I'm clear what the answer to that will be, although on Twitter it's 10% saying no to that. There must be a push on. What will be important about this poll is the size of it. So if you have not yet voted, it is unusually important that you cast your vote. On my Telegram, t.me/George Galloway, on my Twitter, on the YouTube community poll, and on the YouTube stream. If you're watching on the YouTube stream, please share it with all of your contacts. Ditto if you're watching on Facebook or any other platform that allows you to do that. And do subscribe and like the show. Phone numbers, if you want to comment, it's entirely free of charge. Toll free in the US and Canada, +1 844 944 3344. In the UK and Ireland, again free of charge, 0808196 5522. And if you're in the rest of the world, which is most of you, 0044203 966 2625. Don't forget that from this Wednesday, the Wednesday show will begin at exactly the same time as this Sunday show. So a change of time from Wednesday, 7 p.m. UK time. My good friend Lowkey, renowned hip-hop artist, a man of words which carry with them not just poetry, but power, host of the Watchdog podcast and veteran political campaigner. Although he's a young man to be a veteran, he truly is a veteran, inveterate, indefatigable. Lowkey, welcome to the mother of all talk shows. I don't know if you heard my introduction, my monologue, Karim, but the point I was trying to make is that a ceasefire is not enough. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. I feel that pushing this slogan of a ceasefire from the beginning, while I understand how that happened, George, it was essentially working to obscure what is the British and US role in Israel's war in the region. They act as a trilateral security state. Britain has been sending arms, it has been sharing intelligence, it has a key logistics role in this war. The US, it's been revealed by The Intercept, even sent Air Force officers to help with targeting for the Israeli fighter jets. We know obviously Canada, Germany, Britain and the US are the biggest seller of arms to the Israelis in this war. So really, we have to have a clarity. There are mechanisms within the region to fight for independence against these powers, and it's important that those forces are given support and people understand the equation that we stand in front of at this time.
A ceasefire is necessary, but not sufficient. And of course, sufficiently insufficient that it's a guarantee that all of this will happen all over again, as it has happened so often, even just in the 21st century, never mind going back the full 75 years.
Absolutely. And we know how Israel behaves in all of these situations. You cannot trust a single promise that Israel gives. Many of the prisoners that were released in the prisoner swap in the first few times where there were calm, there was a form of truce, and these people were released, Israel has rearrested many of them. Even during the phase when they were releasing these captives, these Palestinian captives in Israeli jails, they were arresting a larger number of the people that they released. So we really can't trust anything that Israel promises during these times either.
And indeed, the rampage has stepped up in the West Bank. Their crimes
Absolutely.
Over the border in Lebanon. There's nobody talking about a ceasefire in the West Bank. Nobody talking about a ceasefire against the villagers being bombed and strafed in Lebanon.
Absolutely. And this is the nature of what Israel is aiming to do with the region. There are several forthcoming wars that will be launched. One of them will be over Al-Aqsa. Israel has been funding organizations with the stated objective of demolishing Al-Aqsa and replacing it with a temple that these particular Zionist fanatics believe to have existed twice in the last 2,000 to 3,000 years. We know that that's going to be a particularly serious confrontation will be caused by that action, and Israel is absolutely clear that it will carry that out. When you look at the way that these organizations have become entrenched within the state apparatus, it's even offered now, an Israeli army investigation found, for women who do not want to take part in conscription to become members of this organization, the Temple Institute, as an alternative. That's by the Israeli political entity. What you also have is no doubt the war with Lebanon, because of course you are dealing with a very different enemy in Hezbollah. You are talking about a very well-armed, very well-trained, very well-organized machine that Israel is determined to knock out. And in order to pursue that aim, it will, of course, implicate Britain and the United States even more in its work in the region.
Now, Joe Biden, in retaliation for the death of 3 American soldiers posted in the deserts near the Jordanian border, but indisputably in Syria, Joe Biden launched another blizzard of ordnance against at least 2 countries. I'm not sure if Lebanon got any of it, but Iraq and Syria were heavily bombed by the United States. And it is alleged, the Jordanians deny it, that the Jordanian Air Force also flew on the raids attacking targets in Iraq. And Iraq has reportedly retaliated by stopping subsidized petrol fuel going from Iraq to Jordan. Tell us your understanding of what happened and its likely impact.
Well, ultimately, George, you have 2 key axes in the region. You have the axis of resistance and you have the axis of assistance. Now, the axis of resistance, it spans across Yemen, Palestine, Lebanon, Iraq, Syria also. In the axis of assistance, what you have is the UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, Saudi Arabia, and you've seen that axis of assistance be active in this war from the very beginning. So during the Islamic Arab Summit in Riyadh, you had a draft proposal for an oil embargo and a restriction on the US using the airspace of Arab states to deliver weaponry to Israel. Now, the only states that voted against it were the UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, and Saudi Arabia. You also have the way in which the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Jordan have worked to provide a land bridge taking goods to the Zionist entity throughout this genocide of Gaza to find a way to circumvent the Yemeni blockade of the port of Eilat. What you also have is Elbit Systems setting up shop. This is Israel's largest arms company in not only the UAE, where it has the Elbit Systems Emirates subsidiary, but also in Morocco too, where it's been announced an Israeli intelligence base will be built quite close to the border with Algeria. Now, a UAE state-owned corporation by the name of Edge Group has invested $15 million in the Israeli drone manufacturer Highlander Aviation. Now, Highlander Aviation's technology is used to manage the Israeli airspace. What we also know is that both Saudi security agencies and Emirati security agencies have used Israeli intelligence firms like the NSO Group and Celebrite to spy on people and hack the phones of even their own citizens throughout the last decade. And in fact, the UAE deal with Celebrite, which actually hacks phones for the British police also, was brokered by the former head of Israel's external intelligence agency, Mossad. What we also know is that the Saudi-backed Affinity Partners hedge fund, which is led by Jared Kushner, owns a stake in the Israeli vehicle company, the Shlomo Group. Now, according to the Shlomo Group, they have provided Israeli military units, the Shaudag and Maglan units, with vehicles and military equipment since October 7th. That's right. Saudi money in this hedge fund has been used in the procurement of equipment for the Israeli military throughout this war. So the choice is very clear for people in the region. You have the axis of resistance, and you have the axis of assistance. Where do you stand?
Yes, and some surprising people find it surprisingly difficult to make that dichotomy work and to make the right choice in that dichotomy for all kinds of reasons, sectarian and otherwise. But what was the effect of what Biden did? Did the attacks on Syria and Iraq achieve anything in your view?
Oh, absolutely not. In fact, it has strengthened the resolve of the groups in Iraq and Yemen. For example, you have had literally Yemeni citizens filming the US bombing of their country and commenting on it while watching from a stone's throw away, saying, even if you burn the whole of Sana'a, we are with Gaza, with Gaza. So this is the overriding feeling within the region in a way it never has been before. There is a greater clarity about who the enemy is, and ultimately the United States is speeding up its exit from the region. You know, in London, George, just tonight, we had the unbearable DouglasMurray attempt to fundraise for Israeli soldiers. And you know why his event was cancelled? His event was cancelled because the workers that worked the venue refused to staff it, even when they were offered triple pay. This is the extent to which people around the world are waking up and very, very clear about this genocidal war and regional war that the United States, Britain, and Israel is launching on the area. But just so people have a little bit of clarity about who DouglasMurray is, let's remember that he worked for many years as a director of the Henry Jackson Society alongside the executive director Alan Mendoza. Simultaneous to that, Mendoza is the president in the UK branch of the largest settlement building organization in Palestine, the JNF, where Netanyahu himself is a patron. Now, Henry Jackson Society historically shares funders with the Friends of the IDF, illegal settlements in the West Bank, and Tommy Robinson and Katie Hopkins. Its international patrons include the former Israeli ambassador to the UN, Dori Gold, Israel lobbyist Natan Sharansky, and former director of the CIA, James Wolseley. At least 2 Henry Jackson Society employees have moved directly from positions within that think tank to the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And you even have a senior research fellow at the Henry Jackson Society, Gur Tassal Yachin, who was previously head of strategic war games at the Israeli Military Operations Directorate. He was also a spokesman for the Israeli Prime Minister and a media advisor to the Israeli Minister of Defense. Now, you would think that all of that would cast doubt on DouglasMurray's ability to work objectively as a host on Piers Morgan's Talk TV show. But he is actually somebody that has been very close to the Murdoch press historically. And one of the key signatories to the Henry Jackson Society's founding statement was Erwin Stetzler, an advisor to Rupert Murdoch for over 4 decades. So it's no surprise that Murray has been pushed so heavily on Murdoch platforms, including Talk TV. The simple fact is this, George: somebody such as yourself, who has worked tirelessly for the Palestinian cause longer than I've been alive, has been vindicated by these events. Somebody such as me, who's been cancelled right, left, and center, has been vindicated by these events. The Palestinians inside Gaza have more people standing with them than at any point in history of the Palestinian struggle. Israel is more of a pariah, more unpopular all across the global south than it has ever been before.
I mean, to all that and a wonderful overview of what we're up against. And of course, in terms of quantity, we are many and they are few. But they call most, if not all, of the shots. What's your theory of that? Short of Epstein having compromised all of them and videos of all of them being in the vaults in Tel Aviv, and I'm sure that that's not the case. What's the reason why you simply cannot prosper in politics in Britain, France, the Netherlands, the United States, unless you are bowing the knee more deeply than any George Floyd protester ever bent the knee. You got to bend both knees to Israel to in any way, never mind prosper, even survive. How do you account for that?
Well, across these decades, George, Israel has been able to insinuate itself inside the security arrangements of both Britain and the United States more than any time previously. There are really a myriad of ways in which Britain carries out services for the Israelis and the Israelis carry out services for the British. They outsource to each other different ways of managing people. And also, Israel is perceived as the global leader in management and manipulation and spying on of people because it has the guinea pig population, the laboratory of occupied Palestine. That's not something that other nations can easily obtain, and Israel has had it for such a long time. It's developed mechanisms of surveillance and control, which since 2012 and the Netanyahu policy that Calculus Tech reported was enacted, it has been exporting the quote-unquote genius of Unit 8200 and Unit 81 within the Israeli military outside to other countries in the guise of private companies. This is one of the things of the neoliberal era, George. Key state functions, as you know better than me, were outsourced to all manner of people. Even if you look at London's water system. Now, this is an absolutely crazy one that took place in 2011. London's water system is monitored by an Israeli company based in Tel Aviv called Tadaku. These individuals are alumni of the Talpot unit within the Israeli military. Now, they receive information about London's water system and then pass it on to Thames Water, not the other way. And now this has been covered by the BBC. Everything I'm saying is repeated what the BBC has covered. I'm not necessarily attributing malign intent by that arrangement, but what I'm merely stating is that the neoliberal era has opened up the space for these alumni of Israeli state institutions to have private companies that carry out the state functions in other countries. And in my personal opinion, when you have a state that is plausibly accused of genocide, you should be very careful about what aspects of state function you outsource. But ultimately, George, we have a few ways of fighting back. One of them is Palestine Action, which has successfully caused 77 investors to pull out of Elbit Systems across the years of its involvement. It's caused the British Ministry of Defence to cancel £280 million worth of contracts with Elbit Systems. It shut down 2 Elbit Systems sites in this country. But another way to fight back is to put you in Parliament in Rochdale at the end of this month. We need you in Parliament kicking their arse. The way you kicked their ass in the United States, the way you kicked their ass at Oxford Union, the way you kicked their ass on Sky News, we need that energy back in Parliament. So I would encourage everybody watching this, especially our brothers and sisters in Rochdale, to get out there and support George Galloway. This is not the Labour Party of Keir Hardie. It's not even the Labour Party of Ramsay MacDonald or Harold Wilson. This is the Labour Party of Tony Blair. We need to show resistance, and we need George Galloway in Parliament this year.
God bless you. Thank you so much, Lowkey, for a wonderful interview that will travel far, I believe. Thank you for joining us on the mother of all talk shows. And I love the strip. Hail, hail to all Celtic supporters. By defunding UNRWA, are the US, EU and UK complicit in war crimes? The overwhelming majority say yes, but the question is how many are going to vote? So far, 25,595 people have voted. You still have about an hour to get your vote in. Remember, on Wednesday, it's at a new time. It's at the same time as the Sunday show, 7 p.m. UK. Now, The Risen People era says, Lowkey is a lyrical genius, probably a polymath at that. You know, I not quite as succinctly or as eloquently as you just have, made that point at the launch meeting of No to NATO, No to War. I've heard a lot of speeches in my time, and to be frank, I quite often zone out because I have preoccupations of my own, and I've kind of heard most people's shtick before. In the case of Jeremy Corbyn, for example, I've been listening to Jeremy Corbyn speak for 40 years. So I don't actually need to listen to another Jeremy Corbyn speech. But Lowkey's speech on that day shook me completely out of the zone. And I said to him afterwards, you are like a Harvard professor speaking there. His grasp of detail and his lyrical genius, as you just put it, his lyrical genius plus grasp of detail, recall of material is simply devastating. It's a double-barreled shotgun that blows away anyone who hears him. He was kind enough to say I should be in Parliament. He should be in it too. Nino says Lowkey has been tireless. He's dealing with so much trauma day in, day out, like others, keeping us updated. He needs a rest. Thank you, Lowkey. Don't we all need a rest? But there's no rest for the likes of us. Quick break, and then James in Salisbury and Rob in Nevada are up next.
A new dawn has broken, has it not?
He had that Clinton thing. His eyes were round and big and smiley, and he was very charming.
He became this incredible pop idol kind of prime minister.
I think most people who have dealt with me think I'm a pretty straight sort of guy, and I am.
New Labour was backed by the most powerful media interests because they realised he was representing them.
He was caught red-handed trading policy in return for hard cash from a businessman.
America has no truer friend than Great Britain.
Both Bush as well as Tony Blair are now wanting to plunge the world into a Holocaust.
JP Morgan paid him off for the Iraq war. The man is a war criminal.
Is Tony Blair a war criminal? In my opinion, yes.
Most definitely.
The pursuit of money has become the dominant theme in your life.
All these relationships are, in most people's estimation, corrupt relationships.
No previous Labour Prime Minister has behaved in this shameful, money-grubbing way.
How do you sleep at night? You know, it's that. It's as a person.
By defunding UNRWA, the US, EU and UK, you could sort of merge these US, EU, UK complicit in war crimes. They are now Sam and Eric. They are now grouped together until the death. Get your vote in. 26,000 now have voted. First call of the night then is from James in Salisbury on Palestine. Go ahead, James. James has just dropped off. I hope that means off the phone and not dropped off, if you get my drift. James in Salisbury, come back. Meanwhile, it's Rob in Nevada. Go ahead, Rob.
Hey, George, how you doing? Yeah, I'd say don't be fooled by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. This guy is owned by AIPAC, which is the Zionist lobby here in the U.S. He's there to siphon votes off Biden, independent, Democrat-leaning independent votes. So Trump's guaranteed, because the Zionists are going all in with Trump. They think he'll be more radical, like more of a radical supporter of Israel than Biden is. So he's not going to be Trump's running mate. He will be there as an independent to siphon votes to guarantee Trump's victory. And that's my take on it. And I haven't heard you speak it live.
Well, he might even be VP, won't he? He might even be the running mate.
No, he won't, because he's owned by AIPAC, and AIPAC can't. If he goes in with Trump, independent, Democrat-leaning independents are not going to vote for him. Ergo, they're not going to vote for Trump.
Okay.
So he runs as an independent.
Okay.
He takes about 20% of the votes, most of them off Biden, guarantees Trump's victory. That's the gamble they're playing.
Well, I think Trump is headed powerfully for victory in any case. But the point you make, of course, raises the obvious question that RFK Jr.'s platform across virtually everything else is completely unrecognizable when it comes to the Israel-Palestine question. He's against war. He's against the Ukraine war. He's against Big Pharma. He's against the military-industrial complex. He's against the three-letter agencies. He wants really quite profound change in the American state. And yet when it comes to Israel-Palestine, I mean, he is the walking, talking Likud Netanyahu handbook. How? Why? That's what people are asking themselves.
George, he was on Epstein's flight log list. They own him. Anybody who was on Epstein's plane is owned by Mossad. He'll do as he's told. That's what it's all about. That's why he won't run with Trump.
What a sad end. What a sad end to a political dynasty. That's what I say. Rob in Nevada, thanks for that call. James in Salisbury is back on Palestine. Go ahead, James.
Well, the first thing to say is that going on at the moment, whenever there is a war, generally speaking, enormous amounts of money are made on the currency markets, Forex trading. And interestingly enough, this fellow, Jeffrey Epstein, happens to be a Forex trader. That means earning cash on currency speculation, on situations such as war, pandemic, terrorism, etc., which is why there was a 44 Allied Nations conference on the 1st of July, 1944, at the invitation of President Roosevelt of the United States of America to discuss the stabilization of world currencies, all agreements to be ratified by the Allied and Associate Nations, their governing bodies and parliaments, for the promotion of world trade. Now, that means promotion of trade, not speculation on currencies in the region of $7,500 a day, 5 days a week, 24 hours a day, for 1 billion people each. Can I just run that figure past you again? That is $7.5 trillion, or $7,500 for 1 billion people each. 99% speculation, which is against what is told to the troops on the 1st of July, 1944, for the promotion of world trade. And we find this again in the International Monetary Fund purposes 1 to 5 that have been set up by the Bretton Woods Agreement, which is its nickname, but its real name is the United Nations Monetary and Financial Conference ratification. And at the end of this Bretton Woods United News video, President Roosevelt obviously has agreed this, it's wartime, and it is said as a foundation for a lasting peace. Now, foundation is very important because it's not saying this is a magic thing, that it's automatic going to happen forever, there's never going to be any war. This is a foundation. This is when it starts. This is to invest, and you will find that Chancellor Dalton of the United Kingdom, Labour Chancellor, on the 12th of the 12th, 1945, in Hansard, is advising Parliament to vote for Bretton Woods and the American loan. The American loan is the word for Marshall Plan, which was what was to get Europe going post-World War II. So we have Bretton Woods Marshall Plan post-World War II for wealth creation to defeat poverty, wealth creation to defeat poverty, creating fascism like Hitler, and wealth creation to beat Stalinism like Stalin. Wealth creation to beat all sorts of problems arising from poverty, such as mass migration.
Well, very fascinating. Takes me back, James. Bretton Woods used to be a standard part of my discourse. It's, of course, long dead. The petrodollar era is itself also coming to a close. The hegemony of the United States rapidly coming to an end. The rise of BRICS, Saudi Arabia this week joining finally the BRICS after much toing and froing. The future is going to be very different to the post-Second World War past. But thank you for your erudition. Some YouTube comments on the poll. Mzi Wakazi says there have always been complicit. Next question. He means that the US, EU and UK have always been complicit. The Whippet Whisperer, Tal4438, goodness me, says Labour in its role of official opposition is just as complicit. If anything, it seems even more hungry for genocide than Sunak. I agree with that. I never accepted that Joe Biden was the lesser of two evils in the United States, and I definitely do not accept that KeirStarmer is the lesser of two evils in Britain. He's more evil, not just because, as in the words of Malcolm X, you know what the wolf intends, but the fox looks like it is smiling at you as it comes towards you with exactly the same intent. And Nancy Parr, 7824, says Canada too is complicit. Quite so. Caroline in Coatbridge on Ireland, where there have been dramatic developments this very week, is on the line next. Caroline, welcome back. Go ahead.
Firstly, I'd like to apologise for accusing you of not calling out the Scottish Labour leader. I never did my due diligence, which was my fault, so I sincerely apologise. You never let me get back to you a few weeks ago, so let's put that to bed. Firstly, I want to ask you, what does that mean for the 6 counties or the north of Ireland, or Northern Ireland, as some people call it, because I am totally astounded to listen to Michelle O'Neill and our opposite. Both ladies were absolutely perfect, both coming from different divides, and it looks to me as though when you said the words, not only will you live to see it, you will live to enjoy it. I'm a number of years younger than you. I will certainly live to enjoy it. As you know, my mother was Irish, right? So I'd like your opinion on the reunification of Ireland. And as I told you once before, the biggest Jerry of them all was gerrymandering. On you go, George.
Gerrymandering. Caroline, thank you, and for your gracious apology too. The events this week in the north of Ireland were very significant. The current rather parlous state of the political representation of the unionist population in the north is something that I hope they can finally resolve. It does no good for anyone to have the political representation of a minority, but a large minority now, but a large minority of the population of the 6 counties to effectively be led by fools, and moreover fools fighting like ferrets in a sack. The unionist population in the north have legitimate interests that have to be taken into account. They have legitimate demands that have to be taken into account. And you can't negotiate with the ragbag of political representation the unionist people in the north have. Having said that, it was a giant step towards the reunification of Ireland that took place this week when the Sinn Féin leader became the First Minister of Northern Ireland. And it is, perhaps not everyone fully grasps it, other than people like thee and me, Caroline, both of our mothers being Irish. The importance of that step cannot be underestimated, because the borders of Northern Ireland were deliberately drawn. That's why it's 6 counties and not 8. Were deliberately drawn to guarantee a permanent Protestant majority in the province that would guarantee the permanent attachment of the British state to a part of once wholly occupied Ireland. Well, by God's grace, by lots of big families, lots of children, and also different trends amongst the unionist population. A lot of their sons and daughters leave the province upon finishing their education and move elsewhere. There is now very clearly a majority of people in the north of Ireland who are at least ready to seriously consider a border poll, a referendum, which will finally bring about Irish reunification. I pray that that is so. I hope I'm right, that I live to see it. I'm absolutely certain that you, Caroline, are going to live to see it. Coming up after the break, it's the incredible, and I mean that literally, saga of the persecution of Imran Khan. Stay tuned. An important piece of housekeeping. At the moment, the mother of all talk shows goes out at 7 p.m. UK time on a Sunday and at 9 p.m. UK time on a Wednesday. That's confusing. So from now on, it will be 7 p.m. on Sundays and on Wednesdays. Make a note in your diary, an earlier start on Wednesday evenings, but it will still remain the mother of all talk shows.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Not only is Imran Khan behind bars effectively for the rest of his life, if you count up the prison sentences that he has now been hit with following his illegal, unlawful, unconstitutional, and subsequently violent overthrow and removal from office as the rightful Prime Minister of Pakistan. Now his good wife is also behind bars. And now, adding insult to injury, they have issued a sentence of 7 years additional imprisonment on both Imran Khan and his wife for illegal marriage. Illegal marriage. Turning the whole thing from a sordid, miserable, hateful chapter in Pakistan's turbulent history into a farce. First it was tragedy. Now I'm afraid it's farce. Our number one analyst and commentator on Pakistan is Adil Raja, the retired Pakistan Army major, journalist, whistleblower, and all-round personality. Major Adil, thank you for joining us again. It's gotten ridiculous now, hasn't it?
George, thank you so very much for inviting me to your show, the mother of all talk shows. Let me say this before I come to what you're asking, that it pains me, since you've introduced me as a former major. I'm a third-generation Pakistan Army officer. It pains me what the military junta in Pakistan is doing right now. They're making a mockery of the entire system, the kangaroo courts of the country, which is now effectively a banana republic. You cannot really say any other word for that. They're ridiculing a guy who is a national hero, the most popular political leader, and he's not only that. He is, in fact, the hero of the nation, the youth. He won us the only World Cup as a cricketer. He was our cricketing captain. He has been the hero of my country for 3 generations now. And he was at the top of the game, his game always. He was at the top. He brought us the World Cup. Then he became a prime minister after a struggle of 33 decades in politics, when everybody told him not to go in politics, and he still went in, and he brought a change in mere 3.5 years. The poor man in my country, he loves him so much. He prays for him day and night because he was feeding them. He made Pakistan a welfare state. His priority was the poor people of Pakistan. And he was thrown out by the military junta because they want their personal interest, which they call them the personal interest, the strategic interest. But because of their personal interest, the military junta in Pakistan, the generals, they've been compromising the national interest for 76 years, past 76 years. And that is exactly what's happening. On the U.S. desires, and now the so-called Cipher case, everybody knows it, he was thrown out. But now what's happening, it is in fact, made a mockery of my country in the world now. This is how because the world is now looking at us and asking us is that how you treat your heroes? I mean, is this the way? They don't understand how actually Pakistani works. Well, how actually, they work on the U.S. desires. And so far in our culture, you must be knowing, George, that women have been sacred in our culture. We as Muslims in the Muslim world take pride in the fact that our women are protected. We don't make them work. We keep them we keep them covered. Why we keep them covered? The picture you're showing right now, Mrs. ImranKhan, Bushra Bibi, she is wearing a hijab. Why is she wearing a hijab? Because we respect our women. But that respect, that cover, that hijab has been torn apart, literally torn apart, but not only for Bushra Bibi, but for the entire population of Pakistan. The Punjab police went in, raided houses of respectable people, and they said that, well, your wife was involved in supporting Imran Khan. They arrested lady wives. They took away their hijabs and they put them in jails for 3 months. And what we call in our country the parda, the chadar and chardivari concept, that's what we call the 4 walls in which we protect our women. I mean, the Muslims have been taking pride of it, That's what they tell you, that we respect, we love our women. That's why we work for them. We don't send them out to work. And, well, we respect them so much that we are keeping them in hijab. Well, all that, the social fabric of the society of Pakistan have been torn apart by few greedy generals and few greedy politicians because of geostrategic interests as well. There are geostrategic interests involved, George. You know them very well. And right now, we have been fighting. We've been told, I'm now 46 years old, 3rd generation, served 22 years in the army. I've been told, my generation have been told that India is our enemy, whereas we understand that peace is the logical way forward. Imran Khan also wanted peace with India, but peace on equal terms. The peace on equal terms was the motive of Imran Khan as well, but India doesn't want that, and India is strategic partners with the US right now. And the Indians wants their puppets like they've got in Bangladesh. Now they want another puppet in Pakistan. That's Nawaz Sharif. And they themselves acknowledge that they've got the political capital invested on Nawaz Sharif. They want to bring him to power. So the 76-year-old enemy is no more the enemy. The generals are looking for new enemies, by the way. That might not be the topic today, but they're looking to find new enemies because they have to justify their huge existence and their military incorporated empire running commercial businesses and everything, George. But it really does pains me. Let me tell you that, George.
I can feel it. I can feel your pain. The origin of all this is that when Imran Khan was asked in terms if he could be a reliable partner in the forthcoming schemes of the empire, it was summed up in his famous reply, absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
They overthrew Imran Khan because he would not follow their orders, not least because it was not yet clear and open what their orders actually were. But they wanted a compliant blank check from the Pakistani leadership that whatever Pakistan was required to do, whether against Afghanistan or against Iran or against anyone else, that they would do when ordered to do so. Isn't that the base of all this?
That you're very true, George. You exactly know what's going on. You've just summarized it. And moving forward, they did a regime change operation at the American behest, and now it's public knowledge. Even that secret cipher is, it's out already. They did a regime change operation on the U.S., one of a junior U.S. State Department officers, dictation. Of course, he must have had that dictation coming from the very top, from the Biden administration. They did the regime change operation. Afterwards, they did a false flag operation on the 9th of May last year. And in the pretext of that false flag operation on the 9th of May, after they violently arrested Imran Khan illegally from inside the Islamabad High Court, they knew people would react, so they put in their own military intelligence personnel in the crowds, in the mob, and they played with the mob mentality to their favor. And there were certain arson incidents, and they played it in their favor, and they, they formed military courts. They in fact court-martialed me as well, George, in absentia, announced 14-year rigorous imprisonment for me in absentia. A court-martial like this have never been heard of. So they sentenced me 14 years rigorous imprisonment just because of supporting Imran Khan. They went in people's houses. They picked up their women. They arrested 20,000 PTI supporters. 10,000 of them are still, arrested, and they were put in jail. They denied bails for almost 1 year. Even women were denied bails. They arrested Imran Khan. Obviously, they made so many cases against him. They sentenced him to 10 years and 14 years, and now this ridiculous, ridiculous sentence. They're annulling his marriage. Imagine that. But this all was done to discourage the upcoming vote, to discourage voters to come out. Imran Khan's party was not allowed by the kangaroo courts of Pakistan to contest the elections as a party. Imagine that. The most popular party of the country is not allowed to participate as a party. The most popular leader of the country is not allowed to contest the election because they want an Indian puppet and the military junta's lackey to join to form a government. Why? And even then, Imran Khan is fighting back from jail. He's got his party members are standing up as independents, and the military junta, the generals, they're scared. They're scared. I'm telling you, George, they're scared like anything. I can confirm this. That what if the young voters there are 30 million young voters. 30 million young voters who registered their vote just in last year. What if they came out? What if the voter percentage, they've already managed the election, George. They've done pre-poll rigging. Whatsoever I'm telling you, that is pre-poll rigging. The kangaroo courts, including the Supreme Court, is with them. They're being handled by the intelligence agencies. The judges are with them. They have bribed the bar councils. The generals are being bribed by the U.S. Let me tell that openly. The U.S. acknowledges that. The U.S. administration officials acknowledge that. They publicly state that we bribe Pakistani generals because we want to get things done. So we publicly, let me publicly acknowledge this, that our judge, our bar councils were bribed, right? Our lawyers and the courts were, taken. They were handled either through blackmailing or through, different levels of harassment. They've got their own judges sitting, their own most favored judges sitting. If they don't like a judge, if a judge is honest, they get him posted out. They don't want them serving over there. They've got the highest judge working for them, and that's why we call them the kangaroo courts. And that's not only me saying it. Don't take my words for it. The World Justice Report says that out of 140 countries in the world, the Pakistani justice system comes at 129th. Right, so almost in the last 10 now. So it's a bit old report. That's why it was 129. I'm dead sure it is amongst the last 2-3 judicial systems right now, the way they're working. So, George, all this is designed to keep PTI out of power and discourage all these sentences, actually, the ridiculous sentence against Imran It is designed to discourage the voters in the upcoming vote. After 3 days, we are going for a poll now. They tried the level best. They dragged this election for 1 year. They're not letting Imran Khan fight as a party, as I told you. But now they're scared of people coming out to vote for the independent candidates who are fighting the election for Imran Khan. But it's a critical vote. It's already been rigged. They're going to rig it, but still they're scared that if the voter turnout, which has never been above 55% in the history of Pakistan, if it goes above 70%, well, the tables would be turned for sure. And they're scared of that.
The power is scared of independent candidates everywhere. Major Adil Raja, thank you as always for a terrific rapid fire rebuttal of the narrative of the tin pot dictatorship currently running Pakistan. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Taha Ahmad says, George is the Imran Khan of Britain. How very kind. Thank you so much. And Road Gent says, remember when that bloke kicked Starmer out of his pub? Hilarious. It was indeed. One of my best friends in the whole world comes up next. He's far away now. Don't get to see him much. Afshin Rattansi. Stay tuned.
The 1897 edition of War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. Read by George Galloway. Available only on Patreon.
The cylinder was artificial, hollow, with an end that screwed out. Something within the cylinder was unscrewing the top. Good heavens, said Ogilvy. There's a man in it, men in it, half roasted to death, trying to escape. At once, with a quick mental leap, he linked the thing with the Flash on Mars. The thought of the confined creature was so dreadful to him that he forgot the heat and went forward to the cylinder to help turn. But luckily, the dull radiation arrested him before he could burn his hands on the still glowing metal.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Here's a billet doux from Steve. Galloway, why do you so vociferously defend the Palestinians' right to defend themselves, but on the other hand, vociferously support the Russians in Ukraine? Is it because you're a Russian asset? By the way, your fellow Russian asset, Trump, will never be back in the White House again and is soon to be a convicted felon. Biden will not even be the candidate and will soon be forced to announce his retirement at the end of this term. He says you can take this to the bank. Steve's obviously a well-placed fellow. Perhaps he's calling or texting from Foggy Bottom, perhaps from the CIA headquarters, perhaps from the Pentagon, maybe even the White House itself. But even if he's any or all of those things, he doesn't know more about what's happening in the world than the host of Going Underground, Afshin Rattansi, who I'm glad to say joins me now. Afshin, what about that message? It just rolls off our back, these allegations of being Russian agents. Although I do hazard a guess that most countries in the world would, maybe even including the one I'm sitting in, would prefer Putin as their leader than the leaders that they've got now and the alternative leaders that they are faced with now. Putin is actually rather popular in the world now, isn't he?
Yeah, I'm not sure whether they'd want Putin to run their country, although that's a bit like Letter to Brezhnev, isn't it? The famous 80s film when working class people from Liverpool working in a factory saw no difference between the poverty and immiseration caused by neoliberalism in Britain, no difference between being there and Soviet Russia. But yeah, it does occur to me, actually, given that you're talking about everyone being accused of being Russian, that if Tucker Carlson has been spotted in Moscow, that explains why they banned Fox News in Britain, according to Ofcom. But they don't seem to realize Tucker Carlson has left Fox News. But clearly, yeah, it's not gone the way NATO countries wanted. And that's why you don't really see that much Ukraine on NATO nation media, as far as I can tell. Because I can tell you, there are reports while this program is going out on air, your brilliant MOATS program, that some of those towns that you used to mention about why were why was Britain immiserating itself to fund towns like Kupiansk and other ones when people in Britain don't even know where they are? Well, some of those towns in the past few minutes won't be in the news in Britain or in the United States, but I understand that Ardivka is about to be liberated by Russia, so they say, and most importantly, the Forbes magazine is saying something about 500 tanks that are going to stop a crucial strategic point at which NATO countries in the proxy war used to massacre those in what was eastern Ukraine. That's what's happening right now, and all ahead of this untold number of new billions going from the European Union to attempt to try and kill more Russians in Western Europe. That's what I'm seeing at the moment.
Now, Zelensky has fired his head of state. It was quite a tortuous affair. First he was fired.
Head of the army.
Then he wasn't. Now he is. Zaluzhny. Kind of risky firing your chief of army staff in the middle of a war, isn't it?
Yeah, I got confused there. I thought you meant he's fired his head of state, meaning Joe Biden, I suppose, Antony Blinken, who runs Ukraine anyway, as far as we can...
I meant chief of army, sorry.
Chief of army, yeah. Yeah, clearly Zaluzhny, who did an interview in... where was it? He did the interview a month or so back, saying it was a stalemate, just when... the Zelensky was wandering around, as he does, telling everyone that they were victorious over Russians in various battles. Clearly, Zelensky didn't want someone like Zaluzhny telling not even the truth, because there was no stalemate. The Russians were winning. And he tried to fire him, and Zaluzhny said no. And clearly the Americans can do whatever they want in that country. So they are keeping Zaluzhny on, as far as we can tell. Yeah, Zelensky, immensely unpopular, it seems. A lot of infighting going on. But, we mustn't forget the tens of thousands of Ukrainians that have sacrificed their lives for nothing, for this U.S. attempt, self-avowed U.S. attempt, as Lloyd Austin, if he's still alive, the Pentagon boss, said, to to hurt Russia, not to save Ukraine. This was never about saving Ukraine. This was about killing Russians and attempting to weaken Russia. And as we heard over so many years, that Joe Biden saying they're winning and generals saying they're winning, and it was all lies. And how many people have paid the price for what Joe Biden has done?
Some people won't understand what you mean by Lloyd Austin if he's still alive. This is an intriguing story. It's a little vignette, perhaps not of great moment. But where is the US Secretary of Defense? Are we really expected to believe that he was in hospital and the president didn't know, wasn't informed? If so, that would take dysfunctionality at the head of the US government into the realms of the absurd. But he has not been seen for quite some time.
He popped up this week, finally, to answer some questions. But, you know, Edward Snowden, who, thanks to Julian Assange, won his asylum in Moscow, told us everything is surveilled, everyone knows where... The White House didn't know where Lloyd Austin, the head of the Pentagon, was, the largest military, he's the titular head of any military in the world. Lloyd Austin, the boss of the Pentagon, was a director of Raytheon. No doubt a blind trust has been put in his name so that when he retires, he will get huge amounts of money from the mass murder of Russians and Ukrainians that he has caused in Western Europe. And of course, the plausible genocide, as the International Court calls it when it comes to the terrible events in Gaza. So I can't remember a time when the head of the Pentagon has gone missing, and yet no one appears to know where they are. Anthony Blinken doesn't know where he is, nor does Jake Sullivan, the national security advisor. That shows, as you said, complete dysfunction. All they can do right now, it seems, is aerially bombard in the middle of the night ancient capitals and ancient civilizations that are all around me here in Dubai, bombing Yemen, bombing Iraq, bombing Syria, just in the past few days, perhaps bombing again now.
That's what I wanted to ask you about next. What's the impact of that bombing? What's the military impact? What's the political impact? What's the impact on public opinion, in your view?
Clearly, in terms of military strategic impact, I mean, some say that automatically when the United States used to bomb Syria, they'd always call Russia first to make sure that U.S. aerial bombardment was just a show of bravado, really, and make sure they weren't going to bomb Russians when they bombed in Syria. So to show how nonsensical they were. They terrify populations, of course, as aerial bombardment does. Yemen, obviously, it will have no effect except to raise insurance premiums and raise the cost of goods for everyone in Western Europe and the United States and cause inflation. There is no way, and Biden seemed to admit it when he was caught off camera, being asked about what on earth the United States and Britain, Britain, which of course was in Aden so many years before murdering communists. So it obviously will have no effect whatsoever on Yemen. On Syria, it may help the proxy de facto ISIS forces that NATO nations have been supporting for so many years. The Iraqis said as much. Iraq has condemned on the other side of the border the bombing of Iraq over the weekend. Iraq doesn't want the occupying forces there. So again, this will raise, and these are Iraqi government elements that are not necessarily as allied to the popular mobilization units in Iraq. So certainly the effect of the British and American airstrikes has been to unite the entire region once again against these NATO powers for mass murder. And of course, the main issue in this region, and arguably in all regions of the global south, even whilst NATO nation propaganda media tries to hide it, which is this genocide in Gaza. The Arab League backed South Africa's claim and suit at the International Court of Justice. I think you said on your program, you had people say it was actually the International Court of Justice that was on trial. I can't remember it ever delivering anything good. And I know opinions vary on this, but how that international court could not have called for an immediate ceasefire as demanded by South Africa and the Arab League, which is, after all these countries in the Arab world, how it could not have done that shows the shame of the international court forever.
What about a ceasefire, Afshin? The talks are going on not that far from you in another Gulf state. They've been saying actually for 72 hours now that some kind of ceasefire was imminent. There's no sign of it. In fact, the killing right now, this evening, is reaching fever pitch in KhanYunis and also in Rafah. And of course, the human debris that is now exposed in Gaza City, now that the Israeli forces have withdrawn. We keep talking about people being under the rubble. We hadn't quite factored in that some of those under the rubble would be evidence of Second World War level style war crimes. Is there going to be a ceasefire? And if so, what will that achieve until the next round of violence and counter-violence?
Well, Antony Blinken is due here in the next few hours in this region. It's amazing, I think, to that so-called Arab street that people used to always talk about, that he can walk about freely, obviously under bodyguard, to the West Bank, where he's also due to go, as well as to Egypt and Saudi Arabia and other countries, and to Qatar and so on. These rumors of ceasefire, where did they come from? It's the State Department's stenographer press releases being repeated and regurgitated, giving false hope to so many people. I suppose the grim reality is that when the killing exponentially increases, and yet it seems to every day and every night, we would expect a ceasefire, and just before something had been negotiated, they will murder even more babies, even more children, even more pregnant women, even more civilian men. Maybe that's a much better indicator of whether there's going to be a ceasefire, because certainly resistance groups on X are certainly not saying that there is any imminent ceasefire of any kind. And so, I mean, this comes at a specific time. You said that Saudi Arabia will be joining BRICS. The Palestinians have found themselves in a very difficult position because, you know, Russia came to the aid, belatedly some would say, to those in eastern Ukraine suffering at the hands of NATO's proxy forces. But who will come to the aid of the Palestinians militarily? I know Yemen has, but Russia and China can't, no matter what Russia and China try to do at the UN Security Council, and the UAE, indeed, calling for a ceasefire, tries to do. So it'll be a case, I think, many people grimly see, and in the Arab world, it must be seen as this, they're helpless. I mean, and Joe Biden and Western Europe are, apart with a few honorable exceptions in Western Europe, showed the depths of their depravity by cancelling money for the United Nations Relief and Work Agency, the only agency that is giving aid through the Rafah crossing in a concerted scale. I know the UAE and Saudi Arabia are doing so separately. So the situation has never been more grim. And I think the International Court of Justice needs to be put on trial for allowing this to happen.
Well, Israel was given 1 month to comply and to report back to the court. What I'm hearing is they're not even going to turn up. They've just treated it with complete contempt of court. And maybe they were right to do so, in the sense that a court which cannot and will not even try to impose its verdicts probably isn't worthy of that much respect.
plausible genocide. What? You just take it back to Nazi Germany. What they'd have said, Auschwitz was plausible genocide. Let the Nazis come back to us in a month's time. I mean, this is absolutely beyond belief of any kind. And we know how weak they are because famously United States officials said if ever there were war crimes charges at the ICJ, or was that the ICC? I get them both confused because so obviously biased are they against the global South. The Americans said they would invade Holland and murder all the judges. I mean, I presume that's what the United States meant when they said if there was ever a verdict against the USA, which is not a signatory in any case.
It is, in fact, an act of Congress called the Invasion of the Hague Act, signed by the President. It is American law that if any American citizen is arraigned at the ICJ or the ICC, either, both of them in The Hague, that the United States has the legal power to send in the Marines. I promise neither of us is making any of that up. Afshin, Rattansi, as always.
And Holland, of course, is participating in this coalition to prevent the embargo in solidarity with Palestine. How can why isn't the ICJ bringing in the Dutch government?
The mighty Netherlands Navy is this minute in the Red Sea, in the Arabian Sea.
Our Queen Elizabeth aircraft carrier is not doing so well either. Our aircraft carrier, the Queen Elizabeth, isn't doing so.
That's something I had omitted to mention. I don't know if it was deeply concealed national armor propre, but as you raise it, let's tell the viewers. Britain's flagship aircraft carrier, headed for the NATO war games, broke down in port and will not now be going. It's Gilbert and Sullivan, isn't it, Afshin?
Off the, I can't remember which operetta that is. That's off the back of the famous picture of two warships colliding with each other recently. Again, all these warships kind of co-conspirators of the genocide. And I know one thing, if you win the Rochdale by-election, Sunday press, even here in Dubai reading it, I can see them all saying George Galloway will never win. If you win, I'm pretty sure you'll be asking why $3.8 billion is, or is it pounds, spent on an aircraft carrier that doesn't work. Wouldn't the $3.8 billion have been better spent, some of it, on those people in Rochdale who desperately have been immiserated over decades of lack of public investment in their healthcare and social care and housing for so long?
You bet. Afshin, thanks for joining us on the Mother of All Talk Shows. Much obliged to you. Phoenix says it's going to get interesting to see the report from the ICJ. I wonder if it will be the same as the one for UNRWA. On the subject of UNRWA, the poll, well, we're getting towards the close now. You've still got a few minutes to vote. 27,660 of you have voted overwhelmingly that the US, EU, and UK are complicit in war crimes by their defunding of UNRWA. Remember that Wednesday's show is now at 7 p.m. It's the same time as this show that you are watching now, 7 p.m. UK time from this Wednesday. Cyrus Shirazi says Yemen is the only country in the world that's taking bullets for Palestinians. Yemenis are the bravest, wisest of all nationals. Prophet Muhammad said, if you want to be wise, be like a Yemeni. Indeed, he did. And that's always been my experience of Yemenis, the wisest and the bravest of all in the Arab world. The Badger says Yemen are the only ones responding to the call of the oppressed. They shall be amongst those honoured on Judgment Day, amongst those that will not fear nor grieve. Coming up after this, it's my good wife, Gayatri, on a social media roundup. Stay tuned. A big thanks to the people who support me on the Patreon page. I really have come to depend on the income from that. It costs £1 a week, not even the price of a cup of coffee in an insalubrious cafe If you think you could stretch to that, please support me on Patreon, patreon.com/George Galloway. Now, the MOATS team have added a tiered system on my Patreon page where you can become an official MOATS graduate. How about that? I speak as someone who graduated from nowhere, from the factory floor in Michelin. But you can become a MOATS graduate and legend. You can give a regular donation to support the show and my work. You can now upgrade from a mere Patreon to a MOATS graduate at £10 a month, as opposed to £5 a month, I think it is. And you can receive official MOATS legend status for £20.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Let's take a call on ImranKhan from Shafak in Bradford. Shafak, welcome.
Hello, greetings, George. Yeah, thanks for having me. Just for a quick minute, I just wanted to say regarding to his wife, Imran Khan's wife. They've done something which is very injustice according to the Islamic Sharia, which if you can search on internet, you would realize that 4 months, 10 days is like a period which within, obviously, a woman can't get married in Islam. But the problem is here, is the judge, I think he's been to 2 in 1. So what he's doing, the judge, is he's trying to be an Islamic scholar and he's trying to be a judge at the same time. That's very injustice there. A woman who is a very pious woman, it's really ridiculous. I think the world's watching and they're laughing, just like the Major said. The second point is, just very quickly, is the Russian mobilization here in England. Obviously, we're British people, British born, Pakistanis, or whatever the ethnicity is here. Now, will we be forced to fight the Russians, or will we be given a choice? Because this is the way it's going. We don't know where it's going. That's all I want to say. It's really confusing, you see. So
yeah, well, as I said in the show a couple of weeks ago on this very subject, Shafak, that anybody conscripted in Britain to fight Russia would not even have time to get to the Baltic states or whatever the front line, casus belli, was before Britain no longer existed, and neither did they, and neither did the Baltics, because a war between NATO and Russia would be a nuclear war within 24 hours. As soon as any such war broke out, then nuclear weapons would be resorted to by either side, and then by both. As soon as one side looked likely to prevail, why would they not fire the weapons that they have that would turn the tide? So the idea that Russia is going to be overrun by a conscript from Bradford is quite frankly absurd and ridiculous. This plan to conscript our young men, and presumably women, and in-betweeners, because the main parties can't quite make up their mind what's a man and what's a woman, as you know. The conscription is really just something that's got up to send a shiver of fear through the community. It's part of the war psychosis, the psyop that they have been involved in now, it seems, over decades, to condition us to war after war after war. I really am pretty certain that it will never happen. Color Grade Fusion says, Rochdale, I know very well. Good luck, George. Thank you very much indeed. And Eileen Gibson says, Rochdale needs, I hope Rochdale knows what's good for them. Thank you, Eileen. Benjamin Savage, on the other hand, says Rochdale needs locals, not Galloway. Well, thanks for watching the show, first of all, Benjamin. I'm not sure what counts as a local in Rochdale, to be honest. My daughter was born in the area, not in Rochdale, because you can't be born in Rochdale. I mean, you literally cannot be born in Rochdale unless in a taxi on the way to Oldham. No Rochdalian will ever again be born in Rochdale. Imagine that. So I'm not sure what a local is in this context, but certainly my Labour opponent is definitely not local, not in any sense at all. I've got two sons live in the area. My daughter was born in the area. I'm a Manchester United regular and kind of more local than most. Sister, I'm a poet. I'd like to see George back as MP. It would be interesting to hear his arguments against people who strongly disagree with him. Well, you'll always hear that, whether in Parliament or here on the Mother of All talk shows, which of course will continue regardless of the outcome of the election. 28,000 now have voted in the poll overwhelmingly that the US, the EU and the UK are complicit in war crimes by defunding UNRWA. Next, it is finally my good wife Gayatri, and there's no danger of us, Gayatri, being imprisoned for false marriage because we got married on 3 separate occasions in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam, in Jakarta, and in the Houses of Parliament in Westminster. So they'll never get us on that. Tell me, what's rattling?
Well, just sticking to the subject of ImranKhan, the criminal fate that him and his wife have faced. Coding says ImranKhan and Julian Assange both show how democratic the US and the West are, really. Can't get over it.
Exactly. No.
I have an email here from your patron, Jim, and he says, this defunding was done with the express intent to starve the people of Palestine, and it's a war crime of the worst example. The powers that be are perpetrating evil without even attempting to hide it or excuse it, which shows that something very ominous is on our horizon. And I kind of share that thought because everything is all guns blazing, right? Nothing is, as he said, they're not trying to hide anything anymore. Everything is out there and very, very open. They're not hiding anything anymore. What's next, really?
Yeah, it's hard to see where they go next. I mean, the Palestinians will not go quietly into the good night, but that doesn't mean they can't achieve the mass extermination. I mean, 100,000 casualties in a place with no working hospitals is, of course, a very considerable step towards genocide. And when you add in hunger, thirst, disease, ill health, undernourishment, starvation, then you've got the makings of a crime of biblical proportions. In fact, nothing in the Bible would be of the same dimension as that. And yet, we're going remarkably quietly into it.
Yeah, well, this is why our friend Scouser Lars says the following. I'd love to know how Western politicians sleep at night whilst being complicit in the brutal murder of children. This comes on the back of the news that this morning at dawn, they bombed a kindergarten in Rafah. A kindergarten, right? That headline in itself is shocking enough. But obviously the kindergarten wasn't running. It's where the displaced people were sheltering. It's unbelievable.
That was in Rafah. The Rafah full-scale assault has not yet begun. It may very well be beginning overnight because they are deeply involved in what can only be described as a pogrom of Palestinians in the town of KhanYunis, to which they originally told all the Palestinians to flee.
Exactly. All right, 2 more. One from Jim, your patron. He says, it appears that the US and Europe are hell-bent on starting war with the rest of the world, despite that being a war we cannot win. Our governments are truly evil and need to be opposed from within as well as from the outside. Now, obviously, you're standing for the Rochdale campaign election, and on that, we got an email from Martin Kirby. He says, 29, that's the magic number, right? Polling date 29th of this month. He says the 29,000, your place in history beckons. The world watches Gaza expects the time is now, 29,000. And he sends a picture of the Mount Everest, it being 29,000 feet. And the line below it made me giggle because it says, why Rochdale? Because it's there. Which reminds me of one of our favorite movies.
How beautiful that is. I'm very grateful for that, I must say. 29 is a magic number. There are 29,000 Muslim voters in the constituency. The election is on the 29th. And as you pointed out to me, Gayatri, I won the Bradford West by-election on the 29th of the month also. I'm kind of feeling good about it. I don't know if my agent, James Giles, is watching. He's the campaign boss in the constituency running things. But I think if he was, he'd tell you that we're doing even better than we did in Batley and Spen, and it feels increasingly like a potential Bradford West upset. You were there with me yesterday. Pretty good vibes, yeah?
Yeah, it was wonderful. As you say, you can't walk the street without being called upon, approached, and cheered on. Everyone is so full of optimism. They see hope. Obviously, everyone is so depressed about everything that's happening in Palestine, in the world, and that the fact that there's no option in the upcoming election, both here and in the US. And now the people of Rochdale have got that option, and they are really going for it. So it's wonderful. It was fantastic.
I hope so. I hope so.
There.
It's a unique. It's a unique opportunity. Lots of people in the world would like to have an opportunity to deliver an electoral blow against the genociders. Genocide Joe, genocide KeirStarmer, genocide Rishi Sunak. It's not every day you get the chance to land an electoral blow on them. Have you got one more, or shall I move on?
Well, this is also on the Rochdale. This is from Tony. He says, not sure if you saw the tweet that I tagged you in about the odds for Rochdale. On Friday, it was 16-1. Last night, 8-1. Right now with Ladbrokes, 5-1. They wouldn't take a decent bet when I tried to have one. So you, George, are the man the bookies fear.
Yeah, thank you for that. I don't, of course, gamble or encourage anyone else to do so, but I do take a particular interest in these kind of odds on political betting. And I started Bradford West at 1,000 to 1, and I captured the seat. I started this one on Friday at 16 to 1, and I'm now at 5 to 1. I'm already the favourite, overwhelming favourite, to be second, but second isn't good enough for me. But if serious money is starting to go on this contest, it's all going on me, and that gives me a peculiar sense of comfort. Thank you, Gayatri. See you later. Thanks for doing that. Back to the lines. Abdul is in Ghana, in Africa, on Palestine. This is the Global University of the Airwaves. Abdul, welcome. Hello, Abdul? Are you there? What a pity. I always like to talk to Ghana. Let's close the poll now at 28,399. And the result was, on Telegram, 97% say yes. On Twitter, 90% say yes. On the YouTube community poll, 91%. And on the YouTube stream, 95%. Pretty overwhelming and a pretty big poll. Don't forget that on Wednesday, it'll be at the earlier time, the same time as Sunday from now on. every show, every MOATS show will start at 7 p.m. UK time. Comments on Gaza and Israel and so on. Sid the Kid 87 says, is Rye hell? And Coding says, what decent person could support Zionism now? And Cher Sydney says, this is as bad as Aleppo, if not worse. And Jack Klugman says, Dresden meets Warsaw Ghetto and Bataan Death March, and the impunity is staggering. Cute Little Gwishin says, remember, the first recognized genocide of the 20th century was committed by Germany in Namibia. Indeed, it was. Well, you thought it was exotic enough we were going to Ghana. We're now going to Laos in Southeast Asia, where Gerald is on the line, on Palestine. Gerald in Laos, go ahead.
Hello, George. Thank you very much for taking my call. First of all, can I just say that how pleased I was to see you on the Not the Andrew Marsh show, Zoom show today with Crispin Flintoff.
Yeah, it's a good show, actually. He's a great man.
Yeah, I totally agree. And can I say that actually, you obviously got a lot of support, it being a socialist Zoom show, and in fact, support for your election campaign in Rochdale, and I'm very pleased to hear that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Can I say that actually, talking of support, I received a warm welcome when I attended the recent Workers' Party Congress to discuss the organised Corbyn-inspired Socialist Alliance, who intend to stand a candidate against the warmonger and supporter of Israeli murder, KeirStarmer. And I'd like to say thank you to the leaders of the Workers' Party and members who gave me that warm welcome and support for our campaign. In return, actually, I'd like to say that, as an admin of that group, we would very much like, we have groups across the country, although we are campaigning in Holborn and St Pancras, we do actually have groups across the country, and we will be very happy to ask our groups to in the area of Rochdale to support you as well. And
Thank you.
Indeed,
thank you.
I think that you're very welcome, George. Can I say that I think the eyes of people have been opened, and everyone can see the murder taking place and genocide by Israel in Gaza is supported by our leaders, both the Conservatives and the Shadow Cabinet and Keir-Starmer. It's an absolute disgrace, and quite frankly, people have had enough. We can see from what's happening across the country, across the world, in fact, that people are fed up with their leaders and the murder that's taking place, and they're realising that they're not our friends. They don't support the worker classes. They don't support us. And people will, I believe, stand up and remove these people. And that start can be in Rochdale with yourself, George. And I very much hope and expect that to be the case.
Thank you. I really appreciate that very much. I am looking forward to a contest between your candidate and KeirStarmer directly in Holborn and St Pancras. A victory for me in Rochdale will encourage people up and down the land to come forward as independent candidates against the two cheeks of the same backside, because it will be clear that it can be done. That Victor says Toby Elwood would top himself if Gigi was back in Parliament. Only the Scottish will know when I say that Toby is very well named. SM says Zionism and Nazism are very similar. However, Zionism was prepared long before Nazism in Germany. And Paul Meany says George Galloway is an international hero against the genocide and Holocaust of the Palestinians. He was instrumental in in South Africa, bringing the ICJ case against genocide, Israel, US, NATO, and would make a great MP. I'm very grateful to you. for all of those kind words and thoughts. I thought the show was marvellous tonight. I hope that you did, and that you will join me on Wednesday for the midweek MOATS, which will be, as I keep saying, at a new time, same time as this show, 7 p.m. UK. The sense of crisis in the world has not dissipated, but intensified. When the American planes are in the air, and whoever was with them but doesn't have the courage to say so publicly, when the cruise missiles are flying, then whatever pre-warning has been given to whomsoever, the terror, horror, is very difficult to forget when you've been under it. I myself have been under aerial bombardment many times, one of them live, well, not live, but recorded by ITN News, which put it out that very night in Eritrea. And the sheer terror of being bombed, of bombs falling from the sky, of pressing your nose into the dirt, hoping that you can get a millimeter, a centimeter lower than you were a minute ago, and the horrifying explosions and the horrifying agony and the shrieks of pain as red-hot, razor-sharp steel and sheets of flying glass suddenly fill the air everywhere and cut, lacerate, savagely cut down people, whomsoever they are. In the case that I'm talking about, all of them children, all of them girls, filmed dying on a makeshift operating table, in fact, a table tennis table, by Desmond Hamill, God rest his soul, of ITN News, moments after it occurred, is something never to be forgotten. I've been bombed by Israeli bombers in Beirut many, many times in the 70s and 80s, dozens of times. I have lain flat on the ground as the actual bombardment or the fear of bombardment, the sonic booms of imminent bombardment terrified all around us. So I have a very personal experience of all of this, the horror, the terror of cowards who wouldn't dream of getting out of their F-16s, F-35s, and fighting man-to-man on the ground against people more motivated than them, is something that invokes in me the strongest feelings of rage, of rejection, and of anger. And wherever I am, whether it's only here on the mother of all talk shows, whether it's on my Patreon chats with my Patreon followers, which I do every day, whether it's on the streets, public rally, for example, on Saturday next in Rochdale outside the town hall. I'm the main speaker in a rally against the war on Gaza, whether it's at the public launch of my election campaign on Tuesday night, which will be very well attended indeed, I think. Hundreds of people will come for that launch, and unusually we can accommodate them because it's a very, very big space, and it needs to be. The venue is Crawford Street in Rochdale at 7 p.m. rather, in Crawford Street in Rochdale on Tuesday evening for the official launch of my campaign. So the campaign isn't yet officially launched, and yet, according to the Mail, on Sunday, the whole of British politics is going to depend on the outcome of it. Well, we've had 3 great guests, we've had great calls, we've had a pretty overwhelming poll. Let's see if we can do it all again on Wednesday. I'll be there. Will you? And if you will, why don't you bring another viewer with you? That way, we can grow and grow the global university of the airwaves called MOATS. Thanks for watching.